The power of God is found within His people, His ambassadors. Yes, the power of God is found within the four walls of the church, but it's also found outside of the four walls because we, the body of Christ, are His church. This is the place of purpose.
Thank you for joining me again on our next episode of The Place of Purpose. I have the wonderful Jordan Lee Dooley here with me. Very grateful for her to be here. I know you guys are going to learn a lot from her. You're going to be blessed by her. So let's start off with prayer, and then we can get into the questions. Father God, we just thank you so much for being here. We thank you for being in our lives, in our midst, being in the center of this Zoom interview. God, I ask that your Holy Spirit just come and take over and word our mouths. Let the words that we speak be exactly what you want us to speak, and let it touch each listener's ears in the exact way that they need. And Lord, we just thank you for your presence, and thank you for allowing this to just be fun. So God, we give you praise, honor, and glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Awesome.
Amen. All right, so I would like to just hear a little bit about what exactly is it that you do in the marketplace? What is it, that thing that you're passionate about, that thing that gives you the drive? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, such a good question. I do a lot of things,
Yes.
but one of my favorite things to do, I write books. I'm an author. And so that's kind of like the linchpin of everything I do, is kind of how I would describe it. I write books and I podcast, and that's kind of my core craft, if you will. It's, I think, really, as someone who is multi-passionate and has multiple ideas and visions and callings and ideas, really what has become a big focal point for me over the last couple of years is honing in on what is my craft and how can I lean into it and do it really well. And then out of that craft and out of growing that, I've been able to create a couple small businesses. One is a product company, and then another one is an education company, which you mentioned in the beginning. So I do a couple different things, but really, if I had to boil down what my heart is, that's kind of what my craft and what has been built out of that. But I really, really love helping economically empower women, not necessarily only through the means of give back campaigns and things like that, as much as I do love doing that, but also equipping them with tools so that they can be financial contributors to their homes and to their marketplace in their own unique way once they find their craft. And so I really love to come alongside women and help them clarify their calling and really give them tools to say, okay, I'm going to be economically empowered to be able to contribute to my home in the marketplace, very much Proverbs 31 style. So that's kind of the heartbeat behind. And I started everything that I'm doing now from a small business, or from a small storage closet in college. And so to see how starting with a really small start has led to this has really given me that heart and that desire to help other women believe that it's possible for them too, and that there's a really unique and incredible call in their life, and that they have gifts and talents that can not only change the world, but also help financially contribute to their households too.
Mm-hmm. So, I know you said that it started off with like a small product business that you had in college. So tell us, how many years do you feel like it took for you to get from that to where you are today? And of course, you're still growing, and God still has so much for you, but how many years was that in the making?
It's about 6 years.
6.
So just, realistically, it's just, I would say in some ways, I would say it's grown quickly. 6 years isn't that long in the great scheme of life.
Yeah.
But it also doesn't happen overnight. So it was something that, especially the first few years, was a lot of trial and error and a lot of, oh, this seems to work. Okay, let me try this and let me step into that. And I would do different things. And I think that's actually part of the discovery and part of the fun. And I think too often we put pressure on ourselves to say, I have to start with the right idea and I have to make sure it's perfect. And then I have to figure it all out and have this plan and a 5-year plan. And I'm like, man, if I would have set a 5-year plan, I would still be selling mugs out of my storage closet. Like, I'd be in such a different place because I could not have foreseen what good and what so much bigger God had, and what other opportunities would come if I would just take one step at a time and keep open hands. That doesn't mean you can't plan, but just keep open hands. So yeah, about 6 years.
So, just to the people that are listening, like she said, it's not a point A to point B and you've landed. It's
Yep.
and
Totally. Totally.
Yep.
Exactly.
And when you said kind of that, like putting one foot in front of the other, it reminds me of Abraham. I like doing like the 1-year reading plans. I just feel like it helps give me some structure and guidance. So I've started a new one, and in Genesis we hear about Abraham, and God speaks to him, and he's just like, all right, I want you to get up, leave your family, and go to the place I'm telling you. And that was it. It's not go to this address, go to this, and you're going to see a tree here, and then a forest on this side, and a river. He just said, get up and go. And sometimes it's the journey that makes this process actually work, rather than if we knew exactly where the end point was, we'd probably think it was too big or too hard and not make it. But it's the journey that makes it work, where it's just like, all right, I have this idea, let's implement this. And as you're implementing that idea, it helps you think of another one, and then that eventually gets you to your end point. So
totally. So many of the random things that I feel like, what's so funny is it wasn't just like Etsy store, boom, where I'm at. It was like Etsy store, blogging a little. And then I started a photography business to help support the Etsy store and do that all in tandem. And then I closed the Etsy, I was able to start and stop different things along the way and add in pieces to make it all work together. And as many of the things that I even did social media management for like a year for a wedding venue. There were multiple different things I did along the way until I found ways to make it sustainable, until I found ways to really find my lane, but I wouldn't have found my lane had I not done these different things that gave me understanding, that showed me what worked and what didn't, that were really like stepping stones and gave me little pieces of clarity. And so I really say like the journey to living out your purpose, so often we look at it like purpose is over here and I have to somehow find what my purpose is and go find it somewhere. Like it's a lost treasure or something.
Right.
When in reality, I actually think it's something that's in here. And I think it's something that we uncover and discover as we step into different parts of our journey. And it's really just a series of making a bunch of small pivots. It's starting small, where we are with what we have, and making a bunch of small pivots along the way as we learn new lessons and uncover new things and discover new opportunities. And that really is where we start to uncover and bring out the purpose that's really been in us the whole time.
Wow.
So much of what I did as a child, and the way I was raised and stuff, it all makes sense to me as I'm starting to see it come together in its own way. But I wouldn't have seen that when I first started my Etsy store. I didn't know I was going to have a passion for empowering women economically, Proverbs 31 style, put it however you want. But I just wanted to doodle on something and not work in a cubicle, So for me, it was just, I think it's just keeping an open heart and an open mind and understanding that your purpose isn't lost. It's something that's inside of you. And if you just if you give yourself the permission to take the first step to try something and put yourself out there, every life experience you have and every experience you have along the way is just going to give you all these series of small pivots as you get closer and closer to discovering what it is that you were really born to do, and the callings, and I say that as a plural, that are on your life, because I think we have one core purpose, but we have multiple callings and a way to live that out in different seasons of our life.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I feel like I speak a lot in analogies, especially as an OBGYN, when I speak to patients, I use analogies a lot because I just feel like it helps everyone understand. So, with you saying that your calling isn't like, a bucket of gold at the end of the rainbow. It's not something that you go find. It's within us. It makes me think about like a diamond. Diamond starts out as coal, and with enough time and with enough pressure and, different things placed on that piece of coal, it turns into the diamond. It's not, oh, I have to go find it somewhere. The coal is the diamond, and it just takes certain events to take place for it to turn into that. So that's really cool. So another question I have for you, so, you spoke about you being an author. Tell us a little bit about your book, because I think even with your book, when you first started writing, you had, and this is your kind of major book that you have, you've written many devotionals and things of that sort, but, with your major book that you've written, it started out with one idea, and then with time, it really transformed into something else. So, kind of along that theme of everything is kind of in transition before it gets to that final product, before it gets to a destination of sorts. It goes through changes. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's funny is the book was originally titled Purpose, which is ironic. And then, the book still was very much about that topic, but it started to take shape after I wrote an initial manuscript. We kind of rolled with it for a little while. And then we had this realization of, wait, there's some really cool changes we could make to make this even better. And so let's take out this chapter and add this one. And so we basically rewrote it like 3 times, it felt like, until we really got it to where we were like, okay, this is the story we want to tell. This is the journey we want to take the reader on. But then we ran into the problem of, what do we call it? I always like to write knowing what my title is, so I can kind of write with this foundation. But then we were in this position where we were like, wait, we need to come up with a title that's a little bit more memorable and unique. And like, let's just really, so we must have spent 3 weeks going back and forth on titles, and for whatever reason, one day I was sitting there and we liked the word own, because we really looked at it as we wanted it to feel simultaneously kind of like a kick in the pants and a warm hug. So we were like, we need a word that's soft and like inviting, while also having a word that's kind of like packing a punch. And we just had such a hard time figuring that out. And then we sat there, and right before a conference call where we were going to like have to decide, because we had a deadline with the publisher, I started writing out like, own your, and I wrote so many words, imperfect. Like, I wrote down so many things, own your purpose, own your whatever. And for whatever reason, I wrote every day, circled every day. Don't know why, because it didn't really stand out to me at first. And I kept writing all these options. And so then on the conference call, I was like, okay, guys, I have no idea, but here's like 100 options. And I just started reading off the list, and the top of the publishing house, she was like, wait, I love own your every day. That's perfect. And so it's just interesting how I didn't even really catch it. I happened to circle it for whatever reason, but didn't think much of it. So then we had to go back to the manuscript and make sure everything really spoke to that title and make some adjustments. So that's really the process. It's not like you write this manuscript, you turn it in, and 6 months later it becomes a book. It's like this back and forth and this partnership. And then it's wait, now that we have a new kind of direction of this manuscript, we've got to make sure the title is strong. Wait, the title's strong. Let's make sure the manuscript really pairs well with that title. I mean, it's a process. So, I mean, interestingly enough, a book about overcoming the pressure to prove and showing up for what you were made to do, aka walking in your purpose, because I don't think you can walk in your purpose if you're overcome by the pressure to prove. Ended up being something that was exactly that process, a bunch of pivots, a bunch of refining, a bunch of going back and forth, buffering, polishing, and finally having a finished product after 2 years. So it's fun.
Honestly, that's the story of life, right? Like that process of making your book was very exemplary of all of our lives, right? Like finally we get to this place where we're like, all right, I'm not trying to prove anything to anybody. I am living my best life, living what I feel like I'm called to do. And that's when we really start to live. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Really. All right. So the next question that I have for you, and I feel like we've kind of answered it briefly in the discussion that we had, is, what exactly got you passionate about what you do? So I know it started out with an Etsy store, and then you kind of spoke about gifts or things that you did as a child has prepared you for where you are now. But yeah, what exactly got you passionate? Was there some lesson your mom or dad taught you as a child? Or what exactly was it?
I think it was a compilation of a couple different things. First, I look back at my childhood, and I was raised by entrepreneurial parents. Neither of them did, they both built their own businesses. At one point, actually, all 4 members of my immediate family, we all had our own small businesses, even when my brother and I were like in college. And so, my first job was servicing my parents' gumball machines, because that was what they did for fun on the side of their other businesses. So I just was always doing things like that. Then when I was in college, I kind of looked ahead to, I was getting, I was about a year away from graduating, and I was starting job interviews and starting to look at what I'd want to do. And I just had a hard time deciding, actually, just speaking to my multi-passionate self. I was going to be a speech therapist. I had my whole first year on track to be a speech therapist, went and shadowed a speech therapist. And I was like, no, I want to have a degree that allows me to do like 50 different things. I don't think I just want to be one thing, which isn't really a thing, but I just was like, I don't think that's for me. So I changed my mind a lot. But anyways, flash forward to, starting a small business, starting with the Etsy store. And I think a part of what really, when I go back to like, why did I do that? It wasn't something that I even ever had thought would be, it was a couple of different things. One, I wasn't sure what I really wanted to do. I just knew I wasn't really excited about the opportunities that I was pursuing with my interviews and what I was looking at. And at the time I was dating my husband, he was my boyfriend at the time. And he made a recommendation. He was like, hey, why don't you just do something creative and fun? And then at the same time, I was having a conversation with my mom, and I told her, I said, I'm just not super thrilled about this career path that I'm on. Like, it's too late to change my degree. I'm about to graduate next year. I just feel stuck. And she, surprisingly said, all right, well, just try some stuff. Just get creative, like take the pressure off yourself to figure it out and just try some stuff. So I did. I tried multiple different things, one of which happened to be hand lettering, which led to the Etsy store. So I kind of dabbled in a lot of things. So the permission to just experiment and try things before I had a perfect plan was really what set me on this trajectory. And really, I think my core desire for wanting to do something different than what my degree was setting me up to do, which would have been to work on in the administrative side of things, which just didn't feel quite like the lifestyle I wanted. Yeah. I really knew one day I want to have a family and have a flexible career and make my own hours and do things like that. Like that was really special to me. And I thought my mom stayed home with me. I mean, yeah, she's built businesses, but I wouldn't have known that she was building businesses because she was always like, yeah, I'll bring you lunch, or she just like did things like that. And so I think because shaped by that experience as a child, it gave me this desire to say, okay, I want to start something of my own. Don't really know what that is, but we'll start with this hand lettering thing. And then it kind of evolved from there. So, that was my original why. Well, I think I lost sight of that for a while. Once it started to grow and I, started writing and building my audience, and it just grew way beyond an Etsy store, I think I got kind of caught up in like, oh, maybe I should be a women's minister. Or, oh, maybe I should, do that. Like I had so many ideas. And I lost sight of why I even started, because I had so many voices starting to ask me for different things. Hey, will you create this? Hey, will you create that? And we can let the voices get to us so much. And then flash forward, as I was writing my book, that became a lot clearer. I began to kind of hone in a little bit. And then it wasn't really till I walked through some really hard things and walked through loss and hardship that kind of made me pause, because I had a million different things that I was doing and was just doing them because they worked. And it really made me pause and go, why did I start any of this? Why am I doing this again? And in losing 2 babies, it made me remember why I started. And it was ultimately because I hoped to have a flexible career for being able to be more available or have kids, when I wanted and when I felt like when it was the Lord's time, obviously, but it was like ultimately for family. It was ultimately to be able to have the flexibility to be at home or to, work on a flexible schedule. And I think I just lost sight of that. And it brought me back to Proverbs 31. And I looked at the model of Proverbs 31, and it wasn't that she didn't work. It wasn't that she wasn't involved in the marketplace, although I think a lot of Christian women and a lot of people believe it's got to be either or. It was just that she prioritized her household. She prioritized her home. She poured into that first and then went into the marketplace. And I think I kind of lost sight of that. And it was unfortunately through the loss of 2 babies that made me go, wait a sec, this is why I'm doing this. Like I've been building this brand and doing all this so I could create options for my family, so I would have the time for them, so that I could rest and not be, and it just really shook me. And I think that's what made me bring it all back together of like, oh, I want to make sure that I am focusing on my home and then the marketplace in that order, and equipping other women to do the same, not neglecting because it sounds cooler to do the other things. So anyways, it's been an interesting journey, and there's multiple experiences, not only from my childhood or the beginnings of my journey, but also a very recent over the last year, kind of coming into seeing how that's all come into clear view through hardship, and I think that can be refining. Like you said, when a coal becomes a diamond, that like if you were a diamond, you'd be, or if you were that piece of coal, you'd be like, this hurts, ow, right? Like you're going through this refining process, but through not only the good and exciting pieces, but even the hard, painful pieces, it's all kind of started to take shape of, I understand now why all these experiences had to kind of line up in this order, as much as it's felt like a little bit confusing up until now, So yeah, I mean, multiple things. I don't think there was one singular event, but definitely some things that compounded on top of each other.
Yeah. Kind of what I've taken away from what got you passionate about what you do is that it is the summation of our life events that like make us who we are, that make you Jordan, that make me Jennifer. And it's not, oh, well, the good things or the happy things or the things where I was successful. It's the trying times. It's the really sucky times. It's the times where you're successful, the times where it was neutral. It really seemed like nothing special was happening. It's like all of those events sum up who we are. And like a puzzle, if you take out one piece, you're like, oh, this piece is ugly, throw it out. Your puzzle's not complete anymore. And there's like a gaping hole where that puzzle piece is missing. So it's so true. It's like, yeah, all the events of our life are necessary. And in that moment, it may be trying and hard and suck, but when we look back, we'll see, all right, God, I see why that had to happen. I do. And it can sometimes take a week, years, decades, but thankfully he knows. So
yeah,
that is
absolutely.
Your journey is really cool. That's something that I can say. Your journey.
Cool and exhausting for sure.
Like, I can say cool, and you're like, cool, really? But all right, so I feel like really a lot of the questions that I have were like answering them before I even get to them. So
oh, sorry. I'm a bad interviewee.
It just means you're ahead of the game. So, my next one are, what are some of the challenges that you faced in pursuing your passion? And I truly feel like you've answered this with, some of the trying events that you've had in the last year, and really how that has helped you hone in, like you said, on why exactly you're doing this. And then it's also really inspired other women to kind of join that bandwagon. And it's not a bandwagon of just doing something because it's cool, but it's like pursuing God and pursuing what your calling is, because in doing that is going to help other people do the same.
Yeah, that's encouraging. I mean, that's, I think, what our challenges can be. I mean, even some of the other challenges, like this is something that may relate to a wider audience, but I mean, even facing expectations. I think there's what's challenging about not only uncovering what you're called to in a season, but also stepping into it, is there's a lot of voices in our life. And whether those are voices online or strangers on the internet that we serve, or customers we serve, or people in our personal life that are in our relationships, or extended communities, or all of the above, a lot of people have a lot of opinions as to what they think you could do or should do, or what they want you to do. Yeah. And if you deviate from that, you can face pushback. You can face people going, well, what are you doing that for? And like, really, you really want to do that? And it can be disheartening, or it can be overwhelming. And that's why I wanted to write on the pressure to prove, not even so much from the sake of like, or from the position of I've totally figured this out and here's the roadmap to overcome it. It's just like, let's go on this journey together. Let's navigate what it feels like to experience expectations, to feel like people have put you in boxes, or like you're trapped under labels, and trying to kind of prove yourself or prove what you think other people expect you to prove, when in reality, that's like the number one blockage to identifying your purpose. And I started to see that through the process, and it's only become more and more clear through hardship. But I think a more common challenge that we all can relate to, even if we haven't faced hardship of our own yet, is really this sense of expectation and what other people expect us to do. And I really would give the advice, I know you're not asking for advice, but I'll give it to you anyway, or to anybody. But I've really had to think through, okay, who's in my inner circle? Who's in my board of advisors? And those are the voices who, when they speak up and say like, hey, let's like poke some holes in this thing that you want to do, or like, let's look at potential roadblocks, or let's think about this in a more wise or strategic way. Yeah. Those are the voices I listen to, versus the peanut gallery where everyone's going to have an opinion, and it can be so easy to be pulled in so many directions and not do anything. Right. So I look at it like, okay, there's a select group, my spouse, God, my mentors, my mom, there's a couple close friends, but besides that, that's like the inner circle. And I think we need to create and elect our own board of advisors for our own lives too, because that will allow us to start drowning out those voices of expectation, so we can get really clear on where we're going and what we're really called to. So that would be another challenge that I just can speak into a little bit as well.
As you're talking, I was just thinking about like our education system. I've been in school for all my life, like legit all of my life. I think by the time I finish residency, I'll be finishing in June. 13 years post high school have I been in school. And, we are taught as a nation to reach a benchmark, to fulfill someone's expectations for us, because that's what we learn in school, right? Like, I think back to like elementary school, we have benchmark assessments. Have you met the bar? Mm-hmm. Have you met the standard of whatever we think the standard should be? And who created the standard? I'm not too sure. But we really do leave out, as we know as a nation, God and what specifically our calling is out of most things. And sometimes it may not be like that path of becoming a speech therapist. Maybe you are supposed to be an entrepreneur and do something that no one has ever done before. So yeah, to break that that mold or that yoke of I need to meet an expectation is so hard because we're trained to do that from childhood. And you know, like as you were speaking, I just thought like, wow, like I've been in school forever. And yeah, we are taught to meet a benchmark. We take exams every year, and are you at the standard? Are you at below average, above average, or at the average of the rest of the nation? And who made that bar, really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's
True.
something very interesting. Um,
Mm-hmm.
So one of the next questions I have for you, what would you say is like a very memorable experience that you've had as you've been pursuing your passion and kind of living out your place of purpose?
It's a great question. One thing that, I mean, there's a lot, but one thing that was really special to me was going on a book tour, national book tour, and getting to actually meet people that were reading the words that I'd spent 2 years working on and getting to hear their stories of, you know, everything from this book inspired me to finally go back to school or leave my toxic job or, you know, start my own small business with my husband. I had a woman come up to me and hand me her business card and say, you know, you inspired me to start my bakery and finally go for it. And it's like, that's what I wanted. You know, I'm still in the middle. Like you said, we're never really at a place where we're not in the middle until we go, like, leave this earth, right?
Yeah.
But being further along in the journey, even now than I was then, but seeing just how my beginning and my small start that I wrote about and saying like, I had no idea that it would lead to me writing this book and getting ready to go on a tour and doing these things. That gave a lot of people the permission, and especially Christian women, permission to say, I'm going to go for it. And not out of a selfish motive, out of a purposeful motive. And I think that's the lie the world has told us. And that's what I saw so much on book tour. I mean, I had women of all faiths there, but I found, especially with my Christian women, that they were just stuck in this space of feeling like, almost like they didn't have permission because it somehow was selfish. And I think that's because the world has painted this idea of success or what small business is to be this greedy, money hungry, you know, boss kind of thing. And it's like, there's so much more to it, you know, and it's a tool. And I think that's why I really feel like I want to step into this gap and give you permission and then give you the tools to go and to own it, you know? So that was a really pivotal experience as well in its own way, but it was so special getting to hear stories and hug people and eat pizza with them and sign books. And it's just a neat experience. I never really anticipated getting to do that in my life. So yeah.
You know, it really does come down to the people. Like, again, me being the analogy person, I think about like, I don't know, animals in the safari. Like when you see the gazelle like chewing grass by itself, it always gets chopped up by the lion. But when they're in a group, they can kind of make a formation and protect the younger animals in the center and fight off. And they can sometimes escape like their predator. So, you know, even in life, even out in nature, like we see that being alone is not the answer. Like everything really does come down to being together, making community of whatever form that may be. And that's where the sweet spot is. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's that was one of your memorable experiences. All right. So next question I have for you is, and this is something that I thought about that really led me to having the idea to start this series, but thinking about power and where power is held, power to do whatever, power to heal, power to create change. Do you feel like that is held in the pulpit? So I feel like a lot of times as Christians, we believe that the power to create change or transform or heal is found in the four walls of the church at the pulpit. Or do you feel like that power can be found in everyday life? It can be found in the marketplace. It can be found in our place of purpose. It can be found out of something that is considered like the quintessential Christian job or Christian profession. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I mean, I speak pretty boldly about this because I think it is a mindset that can trap a lot of people.
Right.
I really think that some of this, I don't know if the word's better, but I think some of our best ministry can be done outside the walls of the church. And that's not to say everyone's job is that. There are certainly people who are called to work within the body and have a formal role within the body that way.
Yeah.
There's others of us who are called to be a part of the body and to be, but to go out and be active in the marketplace. And I really believe some of the most transformative power is in our everyday situations. I think that's why my book is titled Own Your Everyday. It's like, whatever your everyday life looks like, show up in your space as best as you can and own it. And that's where people are going to start asking questions. That's where you can really change lives. That's where you can really, I think, live out your purpose in the best way possible. When we start putting boxes around, what God's purpose for our life is, and we start going, oh, it can only happen in this setting because that sounds more holy, we really miss out on the holiness that is in the hard stuff, in the relationship, in the doing life, in the everyday. That's sometimes the most secular environments that have nothing to do. And this secular sacred divide is almost something that I think we've created in the world. And I often talk about how sometimes people will say to me like, oh, you're a Christian writer. And I'm like, well, I guess that's true because I'm a Christian, right? I'm a Christian before I'm anything else. Right. But I think what we've done in that process of, oh, you're a Christian singer, or you're a Christian writer, or I'm like, does anyone say to you, you're a Christian OBGYN? Like, no, you're serving them as an OBGYN. Yeah. And the reason I think that's important is because I think in doing that, especially in the arts, we've made faith out to be a category, right? Or church out to be a category in our life. Like, oh, I go to this church and that's my faith life. And then over here is my work life. And over here's this, or I, work in ministry or whatever. So because of this genreization or this categorizing of faith, it's taken it out of our brains as a foundation of like, you can call yourself a Christian OBGYN, or you can just be an OBGYN who's unapologetically a Christian and serve people like Jesus would, but you don't need to go market that somewhere, right? And I think we've turned Christianity into a marketing thing, even within the marketplace. And I've kind of had to learn that, like, I'm very open about my faith, but when people say like, you have a Christian company, I'm like, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean? Like, and so I speak to this a lot because I think, unfortunately, in the categorization of it, the danger in it isn't that we have our faith involved in our work. It's that actually we begin to confine faith to a box or into a genre, rather than letting it be foundation of everything we do, whether we work in the church or out in the marketplace or both. And so that's kind of how I've had to shift my mindset over time, because I was starting to feel like I was in an echo chamber. Like, I don't want to just talk to Christians all day long. I want to go speak and talk to people and have conversations and build relationship and do life with people who think completely differently than me. Otherwise, how am I going to influence them? Right. And so I think that's why it's so important to make sure that even if your formal work is within the four walls of the church, which there's nothing wrong with, to make sure you're active and friends with people who are not in that space. I had a friend or a mentor, actually, she put it to me this way. She's like, you need to think of your life and your relationships kind of as a wheel of a bicycle. And if you think about that, if you think of every relationship as a spoke, if you look at the spokes, you kind of want them to be balanced. You want fellowship, meaning you're surrounded by others who believe and support you. Yeah. And then you want to have stewardship, people who don't think like you, people who aren't on the same page as you, that you can influence. And then on the other side, you're being influenced. And that's really where it's going to be healthy. And I think, unfortunately, we just think like, no, the only transformative power I can have is if I'm a Christian speaker and write books. And I can tell you, I've done that. And that's so untrue. I've had way more rewarding impact sometimes in doing the things that have nothing to do with the church setting. So God can use us in any position. And I just really feel strongly that that's important for us to remember when our work begins to feel, heavy or tedious or unholy or somehow, unfulfilling. It's like, look for opportunity there.
That was so well said.
Thanks.
I'm like, my head is spinning a little bit because that was just so well put. But something that I think about a lot, where Jesus performed his first miracle was at a wedding that was lit. I mean, they were drinking, they were getting drunk. It was fun. And I just think like, if like Jesus, clearly he's the holiest human that has ever lived, period, hands down. There's no other question. No one competes. But if he like put on, I'm a Christian carpenter, I'm a Christian, how would he have been invited to that wedding? Because I don't think those people were Christian. I may be wrong, but I don't think they were. But they invited him to the wedding because they liked him. Like, that was their friend. So it just makes me think, like, if, like you said, if we put ourselves in these boxes, how are you going to reach people that are outside of that box? How are you going to reach people that do not step into those four walls? So yeah, the power is held in the person, and inside of that person may be the power of God, maybe, you know, a Christian, whatever, but the power is held in that person, not in the pulpit. So
Yep.
yeah.
That's really good. That's basically what I was trying to say, but I just did this like big roundabout.
No,
So
yours is perfect. We need to hear all that. All right. So my last thing is, I want you to drop some tips, some advice, some encouragement for, you know, any young person, old person, whatever, any person out there who is trying to find their place of purpose, walk in their place of purpose, and they're just not sure how to balance that in glorifying God. And I feel like we've already answered this again, but yeah, I'd like for you to just leave some tips or words of encouragement for them.
Yeah. I think the best thing I can say, and I'll keep it brief, but the best thing I can say is your purpose doesn't change. I think our purpose is pretty dang simple. It's love God and love people, right? It's like, this isn't complicated. And I think that's why when I hear people say like, I got to find my purpose, I'm like, it's actually pretty simple. Like, God's already assigned the purpose of your life. And for those who aren't believers, you know, it's like, okay, we'll start with loving people. We'll get there. But, you know, I think we make it so complicated. And so when it comes to that, you might go, okay, but how do I practically, like, what does that have to do with my career? What does that have to do with what I'm doing in my vocation in my life? And the way I look at it is, I think we can have multiple callings in life. I mentioned that earlier. And I think the best piece of advice I can give you is to take the pressure off yourself, to figure out how to make God fit into it and do all that. It's like, God is in it, period, because he created you. Like, we, I think, have made so many things that are meant to be organic so inorganic through like, okay, from on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. we do Bible study, and this is when we do our God stuff, and then I got to go run to, it's like, what if you just did life? Like, I've had to take off so many of these like Christian box checking things from my life, because it makes us think like, okay, how do I bring God into this? And how do I say, it's like, just show up unapologetically as you are and love people really well. Your purpose is going to come through. And whatever your work life looks like right now, that's going to change. It will. It'll change either settings. You might not change expertise or knowledge, but you might change settings or locations or roles within a company, or you might change your job or your career path completely. Regardless, you know, it's kind of like, I've had to learn, like, wait, we don't have to figure out how to get God into something. God's in everything. It's just up to us whether or not we see him. And it's not our job to force other people to see him. It's just our job to show up unapologetically as we are in him. And so if we can just do that, and we can own the gift and the calling that he's put on our life. And this is what when we say gift and calling, it can sound big and, you know, spiritual and like hard to understand. It's actually like, what is right in front of you? What job are you working right now? That's what you're actually called to do. Who is in front of you? Who's under your roof? That's who you're called to steward right now with most of your time. That's not to say you can't mentor people or that you can't have a side job. Or what I'm saying is, I think sometimes we make this calling and this purpose thing out to be this big, hard thing to understand, this big urethral, like magical, mystical thing that we have to somehow grab hold of, when it's really just, hey, I've called you to show up really well and write this book like a boss. Hey, I've called you to show up and serve your patients and make sure that you are doing no harm and serving them well. Like, boom, right? There may be some new things you're starting to feel stirred to and called to, and you can step into those things as time allows and step by step, but start small, start where you are, and don't feel the pressure to figure out how to bring God into something he already exists in, or how to make it more Christian. It's like, just be who you are, unapologetically show up as you are in him, and he will work. Questions will be asked. You can start conversations, but just do life with people and be excellent, and don't be afraid to be excellent. I think this is something that is so important. Just remember to be excellent. Do your very best with what you have, and it's going to continue to improve. You're going to learn lessons, and God's going to show up in it.
That was good. That was really good. I was taking mental notes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something with time, and I feel like, especially as a OBGYN, as a physician, you're kind of a type A person. I think that's kind of how you get to where you are. But there is that expectation that you need to be superhuman. Like, you cannot make a mistake, because because when mistakes are made, lives are put at risk, right? But that puts this like unnecessary pressure to be God. And we can't, we never will be, and we shouldn't feel like we need to be, you know? And I think like with time, as I'm getting closer to graduation, surprisingly, God has just been teaching me, let it go, let it be. I'm in control, rest in me. And like in that place of being able to do that, that's actually where we can become more perfect. That's where we're able to perform our craft with more excellence, because there's not that nagging thought behind your head of like, oh, I can't make a mistake. Oh, am I doing my purpose? Oh, am I Christian enough? Oh, am I? It's just, you're just doing, like you said, just do what's right in front of you.
There's a lot of freedom.
Yeah.
I just said there's a lot of freedom, you know, and I think it's so easy to put like shackles on yourself and try to have all the answers and try to make it, like you said, am I doing it Christian enough? It's like, what does that even mean? Like it's like, just do your job well, do the best you can. And there's only so much you can control, you know?
Yeah. So, man, that was so well put. And Jordan, thank you so much. I have to show everybody your book because they need to read this. All right. Y'all need to get this, okay? Y'all need to get this, read this. It's excellent. Get it. But thank you so much for your time, your wisdom. You are wise beyond your years. And I'm grateful to have known you online. I'm grateful to have done this interview with you. And I'm really excited for what God has in store for you. The best is yet to come.
Likewise, I really appreciate you thinking of me and sharing me with your community, and just I love getting to cheer you on from afar. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah. So would you like to close us out in prayer?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay.
God, thank you so much for Jen. Thank you for this community and for the work that you have them doing. And I just pray that you remove any pressure that they feel, that you give them the freedom to just show up as they are in you unapologetically, love people well, do their jobs with excellence. Know that at the end of the day, you are in control. And I just pray you give them the courage to take small steps toward whatever it is that you're nudging them toward, whether that's starting a small business or whether that's volunteering somewhere or something else. God, I just pray that they own that with full confidence, knowing that they can't mess it up. We're not powerful enough to mess up your plan for our lives. And I just pray that just settle into everyone's hearts today and just guide their work and their decisions going forward. In your name, amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. Amen. Thank you so much. And I look
You're
forward to
welcome.
the discussion. Thank you.